In a Westfield dining room, a retired marketing executive faced devastating humiliation. What started as celebrating her son's engagement took a shocking turn when he declared she was, quote, embarrassing us. Elena Morrison wasn't your typical grandmother. For 35 years, she commanded boardrooms, known for vibrant confidence. When her son publicly shamed her before his fiancée and family, she had no idea she was about to detonate a family secret. Elena's response, revealing her father-in-law's affair and secret son, shattered everything. What began as celebration became revenge. The Morrisons never recovered. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Elena Morrison surveys her dining room with the satisfaction of a general reviewing perfectly positioned troops. The Waterford crystal catches the late afternoon sunlight streaming through tall windows, casting prismatic rainbows across the mahogany table that has hosted Morrison family gatherings for 3 generations. She spent the entire morning perfecting every detail. The bone china arranged with military precision, the centerpiece of white orchids and eucalyptus that cost more than most people spend on groceries, the wine glasses polished to spotless clarity. Perfect, she murmurs, adjusting a salad fork that was already perfectly aligned. At 60, Elena moves through her kitchen and dining room with the confidence of someone who has orchestrated countless corporate presentations and family celebrations. Her silver hair, cut in a stylish bob that frames her animated face, catches the light as she makes final adjustments. She's wearing the burgundy silk blouse Jake complimented last Christmas, paired with her good pearls, the ones David gave her for their 20th anniversary. Everything chosen to remind her family that despite retirement, she remains a force to be reckoned with. The doorbell chimes, and Elena's pulse quickens. Today isn't just Sunday dinner. Today, they're celebrating Jake's engagement to Victoria Ashworth, a union that Elena has mixed feelings about but has chosen to embrace with characteristic enthusiasm. She smooths her blouse and hurries to answer, her smile bright and welcoming. Jake! Victoria! Elena's voice carries the musical quality that her marketing colleagues always said could sell ice to polar bears. She pulls her son into an embrace that he tolerates with good humor, then turns to Victoria with arms extended. My dear, you look absolutely radiant. Victoria Ashworth accepts the embrace with the practiced grace of someone raised in drawing rooms and country clubs. Her blonde hair is swept back in a chignon that probably costs more than Elena's monthly grocery budget, and her navy dress speaks of understated wealth, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. She's beautiful in that effortless way that money can buy, her smile polite but never quite reaching her gray eyes. Thank you for having us, Mrs. Morrison, Victoria says, her voice carrying the cultivated accent of private schools and finishing programs. The house looks lovely. Elena beams, missing entirely the way Victoria's gaze sweeps the room with subtle assessment, cataloging everything from the slightly outdated wallpaper to the family photos clustered on the mantel. This is Elena's blind spot, her genuine warmth often preventing her from seeing when others are measuring her against their own standards. David emerges from his study, his reading glasses pushed up into his silver hair. At 62, he still carries himself with the bearing of the bank executive he was until last year, but retirement has softened his edges. He kisses Victoria's cheek with fatherly affection and clasps Jake's shoulder. Son, congratulations again. Victoria, welcome to the family. The warmth in David's voice is genuine, but Elena catches the way his eyes flick to her, a subtle warning she's learned to recognize over 35 years of marriage. Tone it down, his expression says. Don't overwhelm them. Margaret Morrison enters the living room like a queen making her entrance. At 85, David's mother moves with deliberate dignity, her white hair perfectly coiffed, her gray suit impeccable despite being older than some of Elena's furniture. She's the kind of woman who makes others straighten their posture simply by existing in the same room. Victoria, dear. Margaret's voice carries decades of social authority as she extends a perfectly manicured hand. How lovely to see you again. Elena watches this exchange with barely concealed annoyance. Margaret and Victoria have met exactly twice, but they speak to each other with the easy familiarity of shared social circles, a language Elena has never quite mastered despite her professional success. There's an understanding between them, an acknowledgement of proper breeding and appropriate behavior that makes Elena feel like an outsider in her own home. Chloe arrives in a whirlwind of energy, her scrubs still bearing evidence of her shift at the children's hospital. At 28, she has Elena's animated nature but tempered with David's diplomatic instincts. She hugs everyone enthusiastically, genuinely delighted to see the family gathered. "Sorry I'm late. We had an emergency with a 5-year-old who decided to explore his nose with a Lego," she announces, making Victoria wince slightly at the medical detail. "But I'm here now, and I want to hear everything about the wedding plans." Robert Morrison arrives fashionably late, his surgeon's arrogance evident in the way he surveys the gathering before offering his congratulations. Elena has never quite warmed to David's younger brother. There's something calculating in his dark eyes, a competitive edge that makes family gatherings feel like subtle contests. Jake, Victoria. Robert's handshake lingers just long enough to seem significant. Magnificent match. The Ashworth name carries considerable weight in the right circles. Elena's smile tightens. Robert has a gift for making compliments sound like assessments, reducing human connections to social mathematics. But Jake accepts the praise with obvious pleasure, his chest puffing slightly with pride. As they move to the dining room, Elena feels the familiar surge of hostess energy that has sustained her through decades of corporate entertainment and family gatherings. This is her element, bringing people together, creating moments of connection and joy. She seats everyone with careful attention to dynamics, placing Victoria beside Margaret, where they can continue their quiet conversation about mutual acquaintances. The meal begins smoothly. Elena has outdone herself. Herb-crusted lamb with rosemary potatoes, her famous green bean almondine, and a wine selection that David chose with careful attention to everyone's preferences. Conversation flows easily through the first course, covering safe topics: Victoria's work at her family's foundation, Jake's latest promotion, Chloe's upcoming vacation. But Elena can't contain herself for long. As the wine takes effect, and her natural storytelling instincts emerge, she begins sharing memories of Jake's childhood with increasing animation. "You should have seen him when he was 7, Elena laughs, her hands moving expressively as she speaks. "He decided he wanted to be a magician, so he practiced his disappearing act by hiding in the laundry hamper. David and I searched the house for 2 hours before we heard this little voice saying, 'Ta-da!' from inside a pile of dirty towels." Jake's smile is strained, but Elena is just getting started. The wine and the warmth of having her family gathered make her feel expansive, alive in a way she hasn't since retirement forced her into a quieter existence. And then there was college. "Oh, Victoria, the stories I could tell you." Elena's voice rises with enthusiasm. His junior year, he got so drunk at a fraternity party that he tried to order pizza from a lamppost because he thought it was a phone booth. The police found him having a full conversation with it, completely convinced it was customer service. The silence that follows is deafening. Victoria's fork hovers halfway to her mouth, her expression frozen between politeness and horror. Margaret's lips purse with obvious disapproval. Even Chloe looks uncomfortable, her diplomatic instincts recognizing the shift in atmosphere. Jake's face flushes red, a combination of wine and humiliation coloring his cheeks. His voice, when it comes, carries a cold edge Elena has never heard directed at her. "Mom, that's enough." But Elena, emboldened by wine and the momentum of her storytelling, doesn't recognize the warning. "Oh, honey, it's just family. Victoria should know what she's getting into." "I said that's enough." Jake's voice cuts through the dining room like a blade. The silence that follows is absolute, broken only by the gentle tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. When he speaks again, his words are measured, deliberate, and devastating. "You're embarrassing us. This isn't the time or place for your stories. Can't you just act your age for once?" The words hit Elena like a physical blow. The color drains from her face as she stares at her son, her firstborn, the child she's sacrificed career opportunities to nurture, the boy whose every achievement she celebrated with unrestrained joy. In this moment, she sees herself through his eyes. An aging woman whose enthusiasm has become an embarrassment, whose very personality is something to be managed and contained. Elena's hands, which moments before were animating her stories with characteristic expressiveness, now lie still in her lap. The dining room, which she had filled with warmth and laughter, suddenly feels cold and foreign. Around the table, her family sits in uncomfortable silence, their faces reflecting varying degrees of shock, embarrassment, and, in Margaret's case, something that might be satisfaction. 25 years of keeping Thomas Morrison's secret flash through Elena's mind in an instant. 25 years of protecting this family's perfect image, of maintaining the illusion that the beloved patriarch was beyond reproach. 25 years of being the keeper of a truth that could shatter their carefully constructed narrative of moral superiority. Elena looks around the table at these people, her people, who have just watched her son publicly humiliate her without coming to her defense. Margaret's slight nod of approval at Jake's words. Victoria's obvious relief that someone finally silenced the embarrassing mother-in-law. David's conflict-averse silence that feels like abandonment. Even Chloe's diplomatic discomfort rather than righteous anger on her behalf. In this moment, Elena Morrison makes a decision that will change everything. Her voice, when she speaks, is quiet but clear, carrying across the dining room with the authority of someone who has run boardroom meetings and commanded respect from Fortune 500 executives. You want to know what's really embarrassing, Jake? Elena's words fall into the silence like stones into still water. Your grandfather, your perfect, moral, beloved grandfather, had an affair 45 years ago. You have a half-uncle named Michael Chen, who's been wondering his entire life why his father abandoned him. Thomas confessed it all to me on his deathbed and made me promise to keep his secret. The silence that follows is absolute. Elena can hear her own heartbeat, can feel the weight of 25 years of secrecy lifting from her shoulders, even as she watches her family's world begin to crumble. Now that, she says, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, is what real embarrassment looks like. The grandfather clock in the hallway continues its steady tick, the only sound in a dining room that has become a tableau of frozen shock. Elena's words hang in the air like smoke from an explosion, and she can see the moment when each family member begins to process what she's just said. Their faces cycle through disbelief, confusion, and dawning horror as the implications settle in. Margaret is the first to break the silence, her voice sharp as shattered crystal. That is a lie. Her words carry the absolute authority of someone who has spent 8 decades believing in her own moral superiority. Thomas Morrison was a man of unimpeachable character. How dare you? It's not a lie, Margaret. Elena's voice remains steady, though her hands have begun to tremble slightly. The adrenaline of her revelation is coursing through her veins, making her feel simultaneously powerful and terrified. He told me himself, 3 days before he died, made me promise to keep it secret. Said it would destroy the family. Jake's face has gone from flushed to pale, his mouth opening and closing as he struggles to find words. When they finally come, they're barely above a whisper. You're lying. This is some sick joke because I hurt your feelings. Michael Chen, Elena continues, her voice gaining strength as she watches her family's perfect world begin to crumble. Born in 1979 at St. Mary's Hospital, his mother was Amy Chen, a nurse who worked at your father's company briefly in 1978. Thomas met her during the construction workers' strike when he was spending 16-hour days at the site. The specificity of the details hits like individual blows. Elena can see recognition flickering in David's eyes. He would remember that strike, remember his father's long absences during that difficult period. Margaret's hands are gripping her water glass so tightly her knuckles have gone white. Victoria, who has been sitting frozen in her chair, finally speaks. I think I should go. Her voice is barely audible, her well-bred composure cracking as she realizes she's witnessing the complete implosion of the family she was about to marry into. Victoria, please. Jake reaches for her hand, but she pulls away as if his touch might contaminate her with the spreading scandal. Don't listen to this. She's making it up. But Elena is beyond stopping now. 25 years of keeping Thomas Morrison's secret. 25 years of watching this family venerate a man whose feet were very much clay. 25 years of being the only one who knew the truth about their perfect patriarch. The words pour out of her like water through a broken dam. He was going through a rough patch with Margaret. You remember, don't you, Margaret? When you were considering separation because he was working such long hours? Amy was kind to him. Listened to him. It lasted 3 months before Thomas ended it, but by then she was pregnant. Margaret's face has gone ashen, her carefully applied makeup suddenly looking garish against her pale skin. Stop, she whispers, but Elena can't stop, won't stop. Amy never told him about the baby. Raised Michael alone. Struggled financially because she was too proud to ask for help from a married man. Thomas never knew he had another son until Michael reached out to him through a private investigator, 6 months before Thomas died. David finally finds his voice, though it sounds hollow and strange. Elena, please. Think about what you're doing. I've thought about it for 25 years, David. Elena turns to her husband, and for the first time since she began speaking, her voice wavers. 25 years of carrying his secret while watching all of you worship his memory. 25 years of being the only one who knew that your perfect father was just as flawed and human as the rest of us. Robert, who has been sitting in stunned silence, suddenly laughs, a harsh, bitter sound that makes everyone flinch. My God, Elena, even for you, this is spectacular. But there's something in his voice that suggests he's not entirely surprised. As a surgeon, he's trained to recognize truth from lies, and Elena's story has the ring of devastating authenticity. Chloe, ever the peacemaker, tries to regain control of the situation. Okay, everyone, let's take a breath here. Mom, are you absolutely certain about this? Elena looks at her daughter. Sweet Chloe, who has always tried to smooth over family conflicts, who has always believed the best of everyone. I have his letter, Chloe. The one he wrote me before he died, explaining everything. I have hospital records. I even had Michael take a DNA test 5 years ago when he contacted me directly. The admission that she's been in contact with Michael for years lands like another bombshell. Jake's head snaps up, his eyes wide with betrayal. You've been talking to him? For 5 years? He found me through the private investigator his mother hired before she died. He wanted to know about his father. I couldn't tell him everything, but I couldn't turn him away either. Victoria stands abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I really can't. This is too much. Jake, I'll call you tomorrow. She moves toward the door with the quick, precise steps of someone fleeing a disaster. Jake jumps up to follow her. Victoria, wait. Don't let her ruin this for us. She's lying. She has to be lying. But Victoria is already grabbing her purse from the front hall table. I need time to think, Jake. This changes things. The front door closes behind her with a soft click that sounds like a gunshot in the tense silence. Jake stares at the closed door for a moment before turning back to face his family, his expression a mixture of fury and devastation. Are you satisfied now? His voice is raw with emotion. You've destroyed my engagement. Congratulations, Mom. You got your revenge. Elena feels the first real stab of regret pierce through her adrenaline-fueled righteousness. Watching Victoria flee, seeing the pain in Jake's eyes, the way her family is fragmenting before her eyes, it wasn't supposed to go this far. She wanted to hurt Jake the way he'd hurt her, wanted to shock him into seeing her as something more than an embarrassment. She hadn't thought about the collateral damage. Jake, You didn't mean what? To destroy our family? To ruin the most important relationship in my life? Jake's voice rises with each word. You did this because I told you to act your age. Because I was embarrassed by your stories. Well, congratulations, Mom. You've given me something to be truly embarrassed about. Margaret rises from her chair with shaky dignity. I'm going home. David, you'll drive me. It's not a request. Mother, maybe we should talk about this. There's nothing to talk about. Margaret's voice cuts through David's attempt at diplomacy. Either your wife is lying about my husband, or she's been keeping this obscenity secret for 25 years. Either way, I can't look at her right now. The judgment in Margaret's voice stings more than Elena expected. She's always known that Margaret disapproved of her, but there was something almost satisfying about finally giving the old woman something real to disapprove of. Now, faced with the cold fury in Margaret's eyes, Elena realizes she may have permanently severed whatever fragile relationship they had. Robert stands as well, straightening his jacket with the careful precision of someone trying to maintain composure in chaos. Well, this has been illuminating. Elena, I have to admire your timing. Right in the middle of Jake's engagement dinner, very theatrical. There's something calculating in Robert's expression that makes Elena's stomach clench. She knows that look. It's the same expression he gets when he's found a weakness in a surgical patient or a competitor. Robert will use this information somehow, and it won't be to her benefit. Chloe remains seated, looking between her mother and her brother with obvious distress. Mom, please tell me you have some kind of proof. Please tell me you're not just... I have proof, Elena says quietly. Everything I said is true. The admission seems to drain the fight out of everyone. Jake slumps back into his chair, his head in his hands. Margaret leans heavily on David's arm as he helps her toward the door. Robert follows them but pauses at the dining room entrance. You know, Elena, I always wondered why Father seemed so different those last few months. Kept talking about mistakes and regrets. Now I know. He shakes his head. 25 years. You've been sitting on this for 25 years. After they leave, the house feels cavernous and cold. Elena, David, and Chloe sit in the wreckage of what was supposed to be a celebration dinner. The carefully prepared meal grows cold on abandoned plates, the wine glasses sit half empty, and the orchid centerpiece seems to mock the destruction surrounding it. Mom? Chloe's voice is gentle but strained. Why now? Why did you tell them now? Elena looks at her daughter, this sweet child, who has always tried to see the best in everyone, and feels the full weight of what she's done settling on her shoulders. Because I was tired, Chloe. Tired of being dismissed and patronized and treated like I'm too much. Tired of protecting a dead man's reputation while being told I'm an embarrassment to the family he founded. David, who has been silent since returning from taking Margaret home, finally speaks. Elena, what have you done? The question hangs in the air between them, loaded with 35 years of marriage, of shared secrets and mutual support. Elena can hear the disappointment in his voice, the bewilderment of a man who thought he knew his wife completely. I told the truth, Elena says, but even to her own ears it sounds hollow. For once in 25 years, I told the truth. But as she sits in her destroyed dining room, surrounded by the ruins of relationships that took decades to build, Elena begins to understand that some truths are too dangerous to speak. Some secrets are kept not to protect the guilty, but to preserve the innocent. And sometimes, revenge carries a price that's far higher than the original wound. The grandfather clock continues its steady tick, marking time in a family that will never be the same. 3 days pass in a silence that feels like mourning. Elena moves through her house like a ghost haunting her own life, each room echoing with the absence of the family members who have suddenly cut her from their world. The dining room remains exactly as they left it Sunday evening. She hasn't had the strength to clear the abandoned plates, or fold the linen napkins that still bear the impressions of their hasty departures. David speaks to her in careful, measured tones, the way one might address a patient recovering from a nervous breakdown. He brings her coffee in the mornings and asks about her plans for the day, but the easy intimacy of 35 years of marriage feels strained, as if her revelation has created a chasm between them that polite conversation cannot bridge. The Ashworths called. David says Tuesday morning, his voice neutral as he delivers what Elena knows must be devastating news. Victoria's father wanted to discuss the situation. Elena looks up from her untouched breakfast, noting the careful way David avoids using words like scandal or crisis. And they're concerned about the family's reputation, questioning whether the engagement should proceed. David's banker training serves him well in moments like this. He can deliver catastrophic news with the same tone he once used to discuss mortgage rates. Elena feels something cold settle in her stomach. Did Jake? Jake hasn't returned my calls. David's admission carries the weight of a father's pain. Neither has Chloe. The isolation hits Elena like a physical blow. Chloe, her diplomatic daughter who has always served as the family's emotional bridge, has also retreated into silence. Elena tries to imagine her children's conversations about her, wonders what words they're using to describe what she's done. Vindictive, cruel, unforgivable. She retreats to her home office, the one room in the house that still feels entirely hers. Here, surrounded by the awards and photographs from her marketing career, she can almost pretend to be the confident woman who once commanded respect in boardrooms across the Northeast. The woman who built campaigns that moved public opinion and influenced corporate decisions, that woman seems like a stranger now. Elena opens the locked drawer of her antique secretary desk, the one David has never asked about, and she's never offered to explain. Inside, beneath old client files and business cards from companies that no longer exist, lies the manila envelope she's carried like a secret burden for 25 years. Thomas Morrison's final letter sits on top, written in the shaky handwriting of a dying man. Elena remembers the day he gave it to her, how he'd made her promise not to read it until after his funeral, how his eyes had been desperate with the need for absolution. She'd kept that promise, waiting until after the elaborate service where hundreds of people praised his integrity and moral leadership. Elena, the letter begins, "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're carrying the weight of my confession. I pray you never have to use what I've told you, but if you do, please remember that Michael is innocent in all of this. He never asked to exist, he never asked to be abandoned." Elena's hands shake as she reads words she's memorized, but rarely allows herself to revisit. Thomas goes on to describe his affair with Amy Chen in clinical detail, how it began during the long nights at the construction site, how her kindness became a refuge from the stress of his marriage and business pressures. He writes about the guilt that consumed him when he ended it, and the devastating phone call 6 months before his death when Michael's private investigator finally tracked him down. "I wanted to meet him," Thomas had written, "but I was a coward. I was 78 years old and still afraid of disappointing my family. I let him down twice, once when he was born, and again when I chose my reputation over his need to know his father. You're the only one I trust with this truth, Elena. Use your judgment. You always had better instincts than the rest of us." Elena carefully places the letter back in the envelope and reaches for the hospital records she'd obtained through a contact at St. Mary's 5 years ago. Michael's birth certificate shows only Amy Chen's name in the father field, but the dates align perfectly with Thomas's confession. The DNA test results, conducted at a private lab in Boston, show a 99.7% probability that Michael Chen shares paternal lineage with David Morrison. Her phone buzzes with a text message, and Elena's heart leaps with hope that one of her children has finally reached out. Instead, it's a number she doesn't recognize. "Mrs. Morrison, this is Victoria Ashworth. I think we need to talk." Elena stares at the message for a long moment. Victoria, refined, proper Victoria, who fled her dining room Sunday night rather than witness any more family destruction. What could Jake's fiancée possibly want to discuss? She types back, "Of course. When and where?" The response comes quickly. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Meridian Cafe on Elm Street. Please come alone." Elena sets the phone aside and returns to the evidence spread across her desk. There's more. Bank records showing payments Thomas made to a private elementary school in Michael's district. Medical bills for Amy Chen that were mysteriously settled by an anonymous benefactor. Even photographs that Michael had shared with her over the years. Pictures of a boy who has David's nose and Thomas's stubborn chin, growing up without knowing why he looked so much like strangers he'd never met. The doorbell rings, interrupting her cataloging of secrets. Elena hurries downstairs, hoping against hope that Jake or Chloe has come to reconcile. Instead, she finds Margaret Morrison standing on her front porch, looking every one of her 85 years. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "We need to talk," Margaret says without preamble, pushing past Elena into the foyer. Her usual imperious manner is intact, but Elena can see the cracks in her composure, the slight tremor in her hands, the way her carefully applied lipstick doesn't quite cover the paleness of her lips. "Margaret, I've spent 3 days going through Thomas's papers. Margaret continues, her voice sharp with barely controlled emotion. Looking for anything that might contradict your accusations. Do you know what I found? Elena waits, knowing that whatever Margaret has discovered will either vindicate her or destroy her completely. I found appointment cards for a therapist I'd never heard of. Receipts for gifts I never received. Unexplained withdrawals from accounts I didn't know existed. Margaret's voice wavers for the first time Elena can remember. I found evidence of a man I apparently never knew. The admission hangs between them like a shared wound. Elena can see the cost of this revelation in Margaret's face. The way it's aged her, hollowed out her certainty about the life she thought she'd lived. I didn't want to hurt you, Elena says quietly. I never wanted any of this. But you did it anyway. Margaret's response is not accusatory but factual, the assessment of someone who understands the irreversible nature of spoken truths. The question now is what we do about Michael. Elena feels a chill run down her spine. In her fury and hurt, she'd revealed Michael's existence without considering what that would mean for him. She'd dragged an innocent man into a family crisis that could destroy him as thoroughly as it's destroying the Morrisons. I need to contact him, Elena realizes aloud. I need to warn him about what's coming. Margaret nods slowly. Yes. And Elena, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that some of what you've broken can't be fixed. As Margaret leaves, Elena returns to her office and stares at the contact information Michael had given her years ago. She'd protected the Morrison family's secrets for 25 years, but now she had to protect Michael from the consequences of their exposure. Her finger hovers over his phone number. Once she makes this call, there will be no going back for any of them. The weight of truth, Elena realizes, is not just in keeping secrets, it's in choosing the moment to release them. And she's beginning to understand that her moment of revenge may have destroyed far more than she ever intended to heal. Elena stares at Michael Chen's contact information for 20 minutes before finding the courage to dial. Her hands shake as she presses each number, and she nearly hangs up when she hears the phone ringing on the other end. Hello? The voice is unfamiliar, yet somehow recognizable. There's something in the cadence that reminds her of David, a measured quality that suggests careful thought before speaking. Michael, this is Elena Morrison. I need to see you. Something's happened. The pause that follows stretches long enough for Elena to hear her own heartbeat. When Michael speaks again, his voice carries a wariness that makes her chest tighten with guilt. What kind of something? I told them. I told my family about you. The words come out in a rush, and Elena immediately regrets how stark they sound. I'm sorry. I should explain in person. Can we meet somewhere? Today? Another pause. Elena can picture him processing this information, this man she's never met but has carried in her thoughts for 5 years. There's a coffee shop called Meridian on Elm Street. Do you know it? Yes, I can be there in an hour. Elena, Michael's voice stops her before she can hang up. Are you all right? You sound. The unexpected kindness in his question nearly undoes her. I'm not sure I am, honestly, but we need to talk. Meridian Cafe sits in the older part of Westfield, away from the manicured suburbs where the Morrison family has built their reputation. It's the kind of place Elena would normally never visit. Small, unpretentious, with mismatched furniture and local art covering walls that could use fresh paint. She arrives early and chooses a corner table, grateful for the anonymity the shabby surroundings provide. Michael Chen enters exactly on time, and Elena recognizes him immediately despite having seen only photographs. He's shorter than the Morrison men, but carries himself with quiet confidence. His black hair shows threads of silver at the temples, and his work clothes, jeans and a flannel shirt, speak of someone who uses his hands for a living. But it's his eyes that stop her breath. They're David's eyes, the same deep brown with flecks of gold that she's looked into for 35 years. He spots her easily. She's the only woman in the cafe who looks like she belongs at a country club rather than a construction site, and approaches with careful steps. When he reaches her table, he doesn't sit immediately. You look exactly like I imagined, he says, and there's no hostility in his voice, just observation. You look like your father. The words slip out before Elena can stop them, and she watches Michael's face tighten at the mention of Thomas. I'm sorry, that was thoughtless. Michael slides into the chair across from her, his movements deliberate and controlled. "Don't apologize for stating facts. I've had 45 years to get used to looking like a stranger." A server approaches, and they order coffee in the awkward silence of two people who share a profound secret but know almost nothing else about each other. When they're alone again, Michael leans back in his chair and studies Elena with unconcealed curiosity. "So, you told them. After 5 years of asking you not to, you finally told them." Elena feels heat rise in her cheeks. "It wasn't planned. I was angry, I was hurt, and I made a terrible mistake." "What happened?" Elena finds herself explaining the entire disastrous dinner. Jake's humiliation, Victoria's disapproval, Margaret's subtle cruelty. She tells him about the years of feeling dismissed, the way retirement has left her searching for relevance, the accumulated weight of small slights and casual dismissals that finally exploded in one devastating moment of truth-telling. Michael listens without interruption, his expression unreadable. When Elena finishes, he wraps his hands around his coffee mug and stares into it for a long moment. "So you used me as a weapon," he says finally. The blunt assessment hits Elena like a slap. "Michael, no, You used the fact of my existence to hurt your son because he embarrassed you at a dinner party." Michael's voice remains calm, but Elena can see the pain beneath his composure. "You took 45 years of my questions about identity and belonging and turned them into ammunition for a family fight." Elena wants to defend herself, to explain that it wasn't calculated, that she was wounded and lashing out. But looking at this man, this thoughtful, careful man who has been living with the questions she could have answered years ago, she realizes how selfish her motives truly were. "Tell me about your mother," Elena says instead, hoping to shift the conversation toward something that might heal rather than wound. Michael's expression softens slightly. "Amy Chen was the strongest person I've ever known. She raised me alone, worked double shifts at the hospital, never complained about how hard it was. She died 6 years ago without ever telling me who my father was. But she left me a letter explaining that she'd tried to contact him once and been told he didn't want to know." "That's not true," Elena says quickly. "Thomas never knew Amy had tried to reach him. He only found out about you 6 months before he died, and by then he was too sick and too ashamed to what? To acknowledge me? To meet me? To do anything other than confess to his daughter-in-law and swear her to secrecy?" Michael's carefully controlled composure cracks slightly. "Do you know what it's like to grow up without half your medical history? To wonder if you have siblings? To look in the mirror and wonder whose eyes you're seeing?" Elena thinks about Jake and Chloe, how they've always known exactly where they came from, who they belonged to, what legacy they were inheriting. She thinks about the family photos lining her hallway, generations of Morrisons looking confidently into the camera, secure in their place in the world. "I'm sorry," she says, and means it more deeply than she's meant anything in years. "I'm sorry Amy struggled alone. I'm sorry Thomas was too much of a coward to face what he'd done. And I'm sorry I dragged you into this mess without thinking about what it would cost you." Michael studies her face, searching for sincerity. "The private investigator I hired found you 3 years before I actually contacted you. Did you know that? I spent 3 years knowing you existed, knowing you had answers, trying to decide if I really wanted them. Why did you finally call? Because my mother died believing she wasn't worth fighting for. Because I was getting married and wanted my children to know their grandfather's name, even if they never met him." Michael's voice grows quiet. Because 45 years of questions was enough. Elena feels the weight of Michael's journey settling on her shoulders, the decades of wondering, the careful investigation, the courage it must have taken to reach out to a family that might reject him completely. And she's destroyed all of that with one moment of vindictive truth-telling. "What happens now?" she asks. Michael is quiet for a long time, watching the other cafe patrons go about their ordinary lives. Finally, he looks back at Elena with an expression that's equal parts resignation and resolve. "Now I have to decide if I want to meet a family that's already falling apart over the fact that I exist. Now I have to figure out if I'm ready to be someone's dirty secret made public." He pauses, then adds with bitter humor, "Though I suppose I don't have much choice in the matter anymore, do I?" Elena realizes that she's taken Michael's careful, private journey of self-discovery and turned it into a public spectacle. Whatever choices he makes now will be shaped by the chaos she's created rather than his own timeline and comfort level. They'll want to meet you, Elena says. Some of them anyway. Margaret is adjusting to the truth. David will be curious. And Jake will need to see you to believe you're real. And you think that's a good idea? Meeting a family that's imploding because someone finally told the truth about their saint of a patriarch? Elena considers the question seriously. I think you deserve to make that choice for yourself. But I also think you should know what you're walking into. Michael stands, leaving money on the table for his untouched coffee. I need time to think about this. About whether I want to be part of whatever comes next. As he turns to leave, Elena calls after him. Michael? Your father, Thomas. He really did love you. In his letter, he said telling me about you was the most important thing he'd ever done. He wanted you to know that you mattered. Michael pauses at the cafe door, his back still turned to Elena. Then maybe he should have told me himself. Elena sits alone in the cafe long after Michael leaves, surrounded by the ordinary sounds of other people's ordinary lives. She thinks about the letter Thomas wrote, about the love and regret that filled every line. She thinks about Michael's mother raising a child alone, about Michael himself growing up with questions that should have had answers. Most of all, she thinks about the ripple effects of secrets, how they spread outward through generations, touching lives in ways the secret keepers never intended. Thomas's affair created Michael. Thomas's silence created decades of questions. And her revelation has created a crisis that may destroy them all. But for the first time since Sunday dinner, Elena feels something other than regret. Sitting across from Michael, seeing the intelligence and strength in his face, she realizes that some secrets deserve to be broken. Some truths, however painful, need to be spoken. The question now is whether the Morrison family can survive the weight of their revealed truth, and whether Michael will choose to become part of their complicated, damaged, but undeniably real family story. Victoria Ashworth stares at her reflection in the bathroom mirror of her Beacon Hill townhouse, trying to recognize the woman looking back at her. 3 days ago, she was planning a wedding that would unite two respectable families and cement her position in Boston's social hierarchy. Now she's fielding phone calls from her mother about unfortunate revelations and, quote, reconsidering hasty decisions. Her phone buzzes again, Jake's 5th call this morning. Victoria lets it go to voicemail, just as she has the others. She's not ready to hear his voice crack with desperation, not ready to navigate the careful conversation where they both pretend this might not destroy everything they've built together. The Ashworth family breakfast table, usually a bastion of civilized morning conversation, has become a tribunal. Victoria's father, Charles Ashworth III, sits behind his Wall Street Journal like a judge reviewing evidence. Her mother, Constance, maintains her perfect posture while delivering carefully worded concerns that feel like verdicts. The Morrison situation has become quite complicated, Constance says, her voice carrying the delicate disapproval she typically reserves for improper seating arrangements. The Whitneys mentioned it at the club yesterday. Apparently word is spreading. Victoria's engagement ring feels suddenly heavy on her finger. The 2-carat emerald-cut diamond that Jake had chosen so carefully now seems like evidence of poor judgment. It's just family drama, Mother. Every family has secrets. Not every family airs them so publicly, Charles observes without lowering his newspaper. And not every family's secrets involve illegitimate children and decades of deception. The words hit Victoria like physical blows. In her world, reputation is currency. And the Morrisons' stock has just crashed. She thinks about Jake. Brilliant, ambitious Jake, who fits so perfectly into her vision of their future together. But she also thinks about Elena's wild revelation, about the chaos that erupted in what should have been a civilized family dinner. Victoria, darling, Constance continues with surgical precision, we want you to be happy. But marriage isn't just about two people. It's about two families, two legacies joining together. The Morrison legacy has become complicated. Meanwhile, across town, Margaret Morrison sits in her late husband's study, surrounded by 30 years of carefully preserved papers. Every drawer has been emptied, every file examined, every photograph scrutinized for evidence that might contradict Elena's devastating claims. The room, once Thomas's sanctuary, now looks like a crime scene. Documents scattered across every surface, photo albums stacked in precarious towers. Margaret's hands tremble as she examines a receipt dated 1979, a payment to St. Mary's Hospital that she doesn't remember authorizing. The amount is significant, but not enormous, the kind of anonymous charitable donation Thomas made regularly. Except the timing aligns perfectly with Elena's story about Michael Chen's birth. "Thomas," she whispers to the empty room, "what were you thinking?" The photograph on his desk shows them at their 35th wedding anniversary. Thomas handsome and distinguished even in his 70s, Margaret elegant in her mother's pearls. They look like the perfect couple, the foundation upon which the Morrison family built its reputation. Now Margaret stares at her husband's captured smile and wonders what secrets live behind it. She's found more evidence than contradictions. A pattern of unexplained absences in 1978 and 1979. Phone bills showing calls to numbers she doesn't recognize. Most damning of all, appointment card for a therapist dated 6 months before Thomas died, the same period when, according to Elena, Michael had contacted him. Margaret had built her identity around being Thomas Morrison's widow, the keeper of his legacy, the guardian of his memory. If Elena's story is true, and the evidence suggests it is, then she's been protecting a lie for 25 years. David Morrison sits in his car outside his office building, unable to summon the energy to go inside. His retirement had been planned as a gentle transition into a life of golf and grandchildren, not a descent into family chaos. His phone shows 7 missed calls from Jake, 4 from Robert, and countless texts from colleagues who've heard whispers about the Morrison situation. The worst part is knowing he could have prevented this. Thomas had told him about Michael's existence 2 weeks before his death, sworn him to secrecy with the same desperate intensity he'd used with Elena. David had kept that promise, even from his wife, watching her carry the burden alone while he stayed safely silent. Now his marriage feels like a ship taking on water. Elena moves through their house like a stranger, her confident demeanor replaced by something fragile and wounded. Their conversations have become careful negotiations around landmines of blame and regret. David loves his wife, but he also loves his family's reputation, his children's futures, his mother's peace of mind. Choosing between them feels impossible. Robert Morrison, meanwhile, has embraced the crisis with barely concealed enthusiasm. In his surgical practice, he's known for his calm under pressure, his ability to navigate complex problems with precision. The Morrison family drama offers the same intellectual challenge, with the added satisfaction of finally having ammunition against his perfect older brother's perfect family. He's conducted his own investigation, more thorough than Margaret's emotional searching. Within 48 hours, Robert had confirmed Elena's story through medical contacts, tracked down Amy Chen's employment records, even located photographs of the construction site where Thomas and Amy would have met. The evidence is overwhelming, indisputable, and, from Robert's perspective, deliciously destructive. "Well, David," Robert says into his phone, knowing his brother is too diplomatic to hang up, "it seems your wife has quite the talent for timing. Jake's engagement dinner was certainly memorable." David's sigh carries across the phone line. "Robert, please. This is hard enough without—" "Without what? Without acknowledging that your perfect family has imploded? That mother's been living a lie for 25 years? That your son's engagement is hanging by a thread because Elena decided to have a tantrum?" Robert knows he's being cruel, but decades of living in David's shadow have left him hungry for moments when he can be the one looking down. The Morrison family has always been David's domain: the successful marriage, the accomplished children, the unshakable reputation. Now all of that is crumbling, and Robert finds himself savoring the reversal of fortune. Chloe Morrison stands in her apartment, staring at wedding magazines she'd been eagerly collecting for months. The pages that once filled her with excitement now mock her with their images of perfect families and joyful celebrations. How can she plan a wedding when her own family is falling apart? How can she celebrate love and commitment when her parents' marriage is straining under the weight of secrets and recriminations? Her phone shows messages from concerned friends who've heard rumors, vendors asking about postponed appointments, and a heartbreaking text from Jake. "Chloe, please call me. I don't know what to do." She thinks about Elena's revelation, about the pain in her mother's voice when she explained 25 years of carrying Thomas's secret alone. She thinks about Jake's humiliation and Victoria's flight from their dining room. Most of all, she thinks about Michael Chen, a stranger who shares her blood, who's been living with questions her family could have answered years ago. The family that raised her to believe in honesty and integrity has been built on a foundation of lies and silence. The grandfather she idolized was flawed and human. The mother she's always defended has destroyed everything with one moment of vindictive truth-telling. Chloe sits down heavily on her couch, wedding magazines scattered around her like broken dreams. Outside, Westfield continues its orderly existence. Neighbors tending gardens, children playing in parks, families maintaining the comfortable illusions that make life bearable. But inside the Morrison family's carefully constructed world, everything is changing. Relationships are being tested, loyalties questioned, and the comfortable certainties of a lifetime are crumbling like foundations built on sand. The revelation that was supposed to embarrass Jake has embarrassed them all. And as each family member struggles to navigate this new reality, one question echoes through their separate silences. How do you rebuild a family when the very ground beneath it has shifted forever? Chloe Morrison's apartment has never hosted a family gathering. At 28, she's deliberately kept her one-bedroom sanctuary separate from the Morrison family dynamics. Neutral territory, where she can escape the subtle power struggles and carefully maintained hierarchies that define Sunday dinners at her parents' house. Now, as she arranges mismatched chairs around her small dining table, she realizes she's about to host the most important Morrison family meeting in generations. Her hands shake as she sets out water glasses and places a box of tissues strategically within reach. The apartment feels too small for what's about to happen, too informal for the weight of secrets and accusations that will fill the space. But Chloe had insisted on her territory for a reason. Here, stripped of the Morrison family home's formal authority and Margaret's commanding presence, maybe they could speak as equals rather than perform their assigned family roles. Margaret arrives first, precisely on time despite her 85 years. She carries a leather portfolio that Chloe recognizes from her grandfather's study, and her face bears the determined expression of someone who has spent days preparing for battle. She surveys Chloe's apartment with barely concealed disapproval. The secondhand furniture, the photos of college friends instead of family portraits, the general casualness of a life lived outside Morrison expectations. "Chloe, dear, this is highly irregular," Margaret says, settling into the offered chair with careful dignity. "Family matters should be discussed in appropriate settings." "And where would that be, grandmother? Dad's house, where Mom doesn't feel safe speaking? Your house, where everyone walks on eggshells around your feelings?" This seemed like the only neutral ground we had left. Margaret's mouth tightens, but she doesn't argue. Instead, she opens her portfolio and begins arranging documents with the precision of someone presenting evidence to a jury. "I've brought proof," she announces. "Evidence that Elena's accusations are based on misunderstandings," and the door buzzes, interrupting Margaret's preparation. David arrives looking haggard, his usual composure frayed around the edges. Behind him, Robert enters with the calculating expression he wears in operating rooms, interested, analytical, ready to dissect whatever he finds. "Where's Elena?" David asks, glancing around the apartment as if his wife might be hiding in the small space. "Coming separately," Chloe replies, not mentioning that Elena had asked to arrive last, with a guest that would change everything. Jake and Victoria appear 20 minutes later, and Chloe's heart sinks at the sight of them. Jake looks like he hasn't slept in days, his usually perfect appearance disheveled and desperate. Victoria stands slightly apart from him, her body language screaming reluctance even as she maintains her polite smile. She's dressed as if for a business meeting rather than a family gathering, armor disguised as professional attire. "Victoria," Margaret's greeting carries warm approval. "Thank you for coming, dear. I know this must be difficult for you." "Mrs. Morrison?" Victoria replies carefully. "Jake felt it was important that I be here." Chloe catches the phrasing, "Jake felt," not Victoria herself. The distance between the engaged couple is palpable. a chasm that seems to widen with each careful word they exchange. "Where is she?" Jake demands, his voice raw with exhaustion and anger. "Where's Mom?" "This is her mess. She should be here to explain herself." "She'll be here," Chloe says, checking her phone. Elena had texted 30 minutes ago. "Almost there," bringing someone who needs to be part of this conversation. Robert settles into his chair with obvious anticipation. "Well, this should be interesting. Margaret, you mentioned having evidence that contradicts Elena's story?" Margaret straightens, returning to her role as family matriarch. "I've spent the past week examining your father's papers, his financial records, his appointment calendars. While there are irregularities, I believe Elena has misinterpreted." "Misinterpreted what?" David interrupts, his banker's instincts recognizing evasion when he hears it. "Mother, what did you find?" Margaret's composure wavers slightly. "There were charitable donations to St. Mary's Hospital, appointments with a counselor I didn't know about, some discrepancies in his schedule during 1978 and 1979. But that doesn't prove anything except what we already know," Robert says with surgical precision. "That father was exactly who Elena said he was. A man who made mistakes and spent the rest of his life trying to hide them." The buzzer sounds again, and Chloe feels her stomach clench with anticipation. Through the intercom, Elena's voice sounds steady but strained. "Chloe, it's me. We're coming up." "We're?" The plural pronoun hits the room like a warning shot. Everyone turns toward the door, their conversations dying as footsteps approach in the hallway. When the door opens, Elena enters with the careful composure of someone walking into hostile territory. Behind her, a man in his mid-40s pauses at the threshold, his presence transforming the entire dynamic of the room. Michael Chen is unremarkable in the way that makes him remarkable. Average height, work-worn hands, clothes that speak of practicality rather than fashion. But his face stops every conversation, freezes every breath in the room. The resemblance to David is undeniable, to Thomas unmistakable. Looking at him is like seeing a Morrison family portrait that includes a figure that was carefully edited out decades ago. "Everyone," Elena says, her voice carrying across the sudden silence. "This is Michael Chen, your half-brother David, your step-grandson Margaret, your half-uncle Jake and Chloe." The silence that follows is deafening. Margaret stares at Michael as if he's materialized from her worst nightmares. David's face cycles through shock, recognition, and something that might be wonder. Jake looks between Michael and his grandmother, waiting for someone to deny what his eyes are telling him. Victoria breaks the silence with a sharp intake of breath. "Oh my God! Jake, he looks exactly like your baby pictures." Michael steps fully into the apartment, his movements careful and controlled. "Mrs. Morrison," he addresses Margaret directly. "I know this is difficult. I didn't ask for this meeting, but I think it's time we all stopped pretending I don't exist." Margaret's carefully prepared composure crumbles. The documents in her portfolio, the evidence she'd assembled to disprove Elena's claims, suddenly seem pathetic in the face of Michael's undeniable presence. "You have his eyes," she whispers, and the admission sounds like surrender. "I have a lot of things that belong to him," Michael replies, not unkindly but without apology, including questions that should have been answered 45 years ago. Robert leans forward, his analytical nature taking over. "Well, this certainly settles the paternity question. Elena, you could have saved us all a lot of trouble by producing him earlier." "I asked her not to," Michael says firmly. "I needed time to decide if I wanted to be part of this family. After what happened Sunday night, that decision was made for me." Jake finds his voice, though it sounds hollow and strange. "You're real. You're actually real." "I've been real for 45 years, Jake. I just wasn't convenient for your family's story." Michael's words carry no malice, but their impact is devastating. "I grew up 10 miles from here, went to Westfield High School's biggest rival. I probably played against your football team." The mundane details hit harder than accusations would have. Michael isn't a distant scandal. He's been part of their community, their world, while they lived in willful ignorance of his existence. Chloe, ever the peacemaker, tries to regain control of the situation. Maybe we should all sit down. We have a lot to talk about. But the careful arrangement of chairs seems inadequate now. This isn't a family meeting. It's a reckoning that's been 45 years in the making. David stares at Michael with undisguised fascination. You knew about him, he says to Elena, the pieces finally clicking into place. All these years, you knew, and you let us. Let you what? Elena's composure finally cracks, her voice rising with decades of suppressed frustration. Let you worship a man who abandoned his son? Let you build your identity around being morally superior to everyone else? Let you treat me like an embarrassment while I protected your family's precious reputation? That's not fair, Jake protests. We never what? Never made me feel like I wasn't good enough. Never rolled your eyes at my stories or my enthusiasm. Never acted like my very presence was something to be managed and contained. Elena's words pour out like water through a broken dam. I spent 25 years being the keeper of your grandfather's shame, while being told I was too much, too loud, too embarrassing for the Morrison family. Margaret struggles to her feet, her age and shock making her movements unsteady. Elena, please, there's no need to. There's every need, Michael interrupts, his quiet voice somehow commanding attention. Because this isn't just about secrets anymore. This is about a family that's been built on lies and selective memory. Victoria shifts uncomfortably in her chair, clearly regretting her decision to attend. Perhaps I should go. This feels like it should be private. No, Jake says quickly, reaching for her hand. Stay, please. You're going to be part of this family. You should know what we're really like. That's just it, Jake. Victoria's voice is gentle but firm. I'm not sure I am going to be part of this family. The admission hangs in the air like a death sentence. Jake's face goes pale as he realizes that his mother's revelation hasn't just embarrassed him. It's cost him the woman he loves. Victoria, please. Jake's voice breaks with desperation. Don't let this destroy us. My mother made a mistake, but that doesn't have to. Your mother told the truth, Michael says quietly. Maybe for the first time in 25 years, someone in this family told the truth. The question is whether you can handle it. Robert laughs, the sound bitter and sharp. Oh, this is rich. The bastard grandson is lecturing us about honesty. Robert! David's voice cracks like a whip, but Michael holds up a hand to stop him. It's all right, Michael says, his calm more devastating than anger would have been. I've been called worse things than bastard, usually by people who were legitimate but had never earned anything in their lives. The quiet dignity of Michael's response makes Robert's cruelty seem petty and small. In the silence that follows, Chloe finally speaks. This is exactly what Mom was talking about, she says, her voice shaking with emotion. We act like we're better than everyone else, like our family is somehow special and pure. But look at us. Look at how we're treating each other. How we're treating Michael. Chloe's right, David says suddenly, his voice heavy with recognition. We've all been living in a fantasy where Father was perfect, where our family was above reproach, where Elena's enthusiasm was our biggest problem. He looks at Michael with something approaching shame. I knew about you. Father told me before he died, and I chose to stay silent. I let Elena carry that burden alone because it was easier than facing the truth. Elena stares at her husband in shock. You knew? You knew and you let me. I'm sorry, David's voice breaks. I was a coward. I chose protecting Father's memory over supporting my wife. I chose comfortable lies over difficult truths. Margaret sinks back into her chair, her portfolio of useless evidence scattered across her lap. 53 years of marriage, she whispers. I thought I knew him. I thought we had no secrets. You did know him, Michael says gently, and everyone turns to look at him. He wasn't a perfect man. But he wasn't a monster either. He made a mistake, and then he made another mistake by hiding it. But according to Elena, he spent his last months trying to figure out how to make it right. Too little, too late, Jake says bitterly. Michael's expression hardens slightly. Maybe, but at least he tried. What's your excuse for treating your mother like an embarrassment? What's your excuse for being ashamed of the woman who protected your family's reputation for 25 years? Jake flinches, as if he's been slapped. I didn't mean. You meant exactly what you said, Michael continues relentlessly. You were embarrassed by her stories, by her personality, by the way she dared to take up space in your perfect world. You treated her like a liability instead of recognizing her as the person who sacrificed her own peace of mind to protect yours. Victoria stands abruptly, her composure finally cracking. I can't do this. Jake, I'm sorry, but I can't be part of this. My family, they'll never accept this level of chaos. Victoria, please. Jake starts to follow her, but she's already moving toward the door. I need time to think, Victoria says, not turning around. This isn't just about secrets. It's about who you all really are when the pressure's on, and I'm not sure I recognize any of you. The door closes behind her with a soft click that sounds like a gavel falling. Jake stares at the closed door for a long moment before turning back to his family with raw fury in his eyes. Are you satisfied now, Mom? You've destroyed my engagement, humiliated our family, and dragged a stranger into our private business. Was your revenge worth it? Elena looks at her son, this man she raised, this child she loved more than her own life, and realizes that some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. I don't know, Jake, she says quietly. Ask me in a year whether having an honest family was worth losing a dishonest one. Michael moves toward the door, clearly recognizing that his presence has accomplished what Elena intended, forced the Morrison family to confront their own flaws and pretenses. But before he leaves, he turns back to address them all. For what it's worth, he says, I didn't want to be anyone's weapon or anyone's shame. I just wanted to know where I came from. Now I do. The question is what you're all going to do with the truth, now that it's finally out in the open. As Michael leaves, the Morrison family sits in the wreckage of their carefully constructed world, finally seeing each other clearly for the first time in decades. The truth has been spoken, the secrets revealed, and now they must decide whether honesty is a foundation strong enough to build a new family upon, or whether some truths are too devastating to survive. The silence in Chloe's apartment after Michael's departure feels different from the tense quiet that preceded the confrontation. This silence carries weight, the heavy stillness of people processing revelations that have fundamentally altered their understanding of themselves and each other. Elena sits perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, watching her family absorb the full magnitude of what has just transpired. Jake is the first to move, pulling out his phone with shaking hands. I have to call Victoria. I have to fix this. Jake, Chloe says gently, maybe you should give her some time. Time for what? Time for her family to convince her I'm damaged goods? Time for her to realize she's better off without the Morrison family chaos? Jake's voice rises with each word, desperation bleeding through his carefully maintained composure. I can't lose her over this. I won't. He steps into Chloe's small kitchen, his voice carrying back to the living room as he leaves increasingly frantic voicemails. Victoria, please call me back. We can work through this. Don't let my family's problems destroy what we have. Please call me. David watches his son with a mixture of sympathy and recognition. He remembers being young and certain that love could overcome any obstacle, that the right words could heal any wound. Now, at 62, he knows that some damage runs too deep for simple apologies. Margaret sits like a statue in her chair, her usually perfect posture slumped with exhaustion. The portfolio that had contained her evidence, her desperate attempt to prove Elena wrong, lies scattered at her feet like broken dreams. For 85 years, she has lived with absolute certainty about right and wrong, about her place in the world, about the man she married. All of that certainty has crumbled in the space of an hour. He looked so much like Thomas, she whispers, her voice barely audible. When Thomas was young, when I first met him, Michael has his father's hands. Elena feels an unexpected surge of compassion for her mother-in-law. Whatever animosity has existed between them, Margaret is still a woman who has just learned that her 53-year marriage was built on incomplete truths. Margaret, Elena says carefully, Thomas loved you. Whatever happened with Amy Chen, whatever mistakes he made, his love for you was real. Was it? Margaret's question carries the weight of decades of shared memories suddenly cast in doubt. How do I know what was real if he could keep something this significant hidden from me? Robert, who has been uncharacteristically quiet since Michael's departure, finally speaks. Maybe that's the wrong question, Mother. Maybe the question is whether you can love a flawed man as much as you loved a perfect one. The unexpected wisdom in Robert's words surprises everyone, including himself. His usual competitiveness with David seems to have evaporated in the face of larger family truths. I need to go home, Margaret says, struggling to her feet. I need to think. David rises to help her, but Margaret waves him away with a flash of her old imperious manner. I'm perfectly capable of calling a cab. I've been taking care of myself for 85 years. I don't intend to stop now. As Margaret gathers her things, Elena realizes that her mother-in-law's independence might be the key to her survival. Margaret has always defined herself through her relationships, as Thomas's wife, as David's mother, as the Morrison family matriarch. Now she has the opportunity to discover who she is beyond those roles. After Margaret leaves, the remaining family members sit in uncomfortable proximity. Jake has moved his phone calls to Chloe's bedroom, his voice carrying through the thin walls as he pleads with Victoria's voicemail. David stares out the window at the ordinary Tuesday afternoon, watching people go about their normal lives while his world reshapes itself around him. I should go too, Elena says finally. I've done enough damage for one day. Elena, wait. David's voice stops her at the door. We need to talk, really talk. Not the careful conversations we've been having since Sunday. Elena meets her husband's eyes, seeing exhaustion and confusion, but also something that might be understanding. Are you ready for that conversation, David? Because it's going to involve admitting that you've known about Michael for years, while watching me carry that secret alone. I know. David's admission is quiet but clear. I was protecting the wrong person. I should have been protecting you. Chloe looks between her parents, recognizing the fragile moment of potential reconciliation. Maybe you two should go home and have that conversation in private. As Elena and David prepare to leave, Jake emerges from the bedroom, his face ashen. She's not answering. Victoria's not answering her phone, and her doorman said she left with suitcases. The finality of the image, Victoria with packed bags, hits Jake like a physical blow. He sinks onto Chloe's couch, his head in his hands. Maybe this is for the best? Chloe says gently, sitting beside her brother. If Victoria can't handle our family at its worst, how is she going to handle being part of it for the rest of her life? She wasn't signing up for this? Jake protests. She was signing up for a normal family with normal problems. Not grandfather's secret affair and mom's nuclear option revenge. But this is our family, Chloe points out. This is who we are when the surface polish gets stripped away. Don't you want to marry someone who can love all of us, not just the version we present at dinner parties? Jake looks at his sister as if she's speaking a foreign language. His entire adult life has been built around managing perceptions, controlling narratives, presenting the right image to the right people. The idea of being loved for who he really is, flaws, family chaos and all, seems both terrifying and impossible. Elena and David drive home in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The house that has been their sanctuary for 35 years feels different now, charged with the energy of unspoken truths and looming decisions. They move through the familiar rooms like strangers, each wondering if their marriage can survive the weight of revealed secrets and divided loyalties. In the kitchen where Elena prepared Sunday's disastrous dinner, David finally breaks the silence. I kept Father's secret because I thought it would die with him. I thought protecting his memory was more important than honoring your sacrifice. Elena pours herself a glass of wine, the same Chablis they'd shared with such optimism 4 days ago. And I revealed his secret because I thought humiliating Jake was more important than protecting our family's peace. We both made choices based on what we thought mattered most. What matters most to you now? David asks, and Elena realizes this might be the most important question of their marriage. She considers the question seriously, thinking about the isolation of the past 4 days, the satisfaction of finally speaking a truth she's carried for decades, the pain of watching her family fracture. I want to matter, Elena says finally. I want my voice to count, my feelings to be considered, my contributions to be valued. I spent 35 years building a career where I commanded respect, and then I retired into a family where I was treated like an embarrassing appendage. David flinches at the honesty but doesn't defend or deflect. You do matter. You've always mattered to me. But you stayed silent when Jake humiliated me. You chose family peace over standing up for your wife. Elena's words are matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. I need to know that won't happen again. It won't, David says with quiet conviction. I've spent 4 days watching our family tear itself apart rather than face uncomfortable truths. I'm done choosing easy lies over difficult honesty. Across town, Margaret Morrison sits in her late husband's study, but instead of searching through papers for evidence of his perfection, she's reading his journals, volumes she'd never been curious about before. Page after page reveals a man she never fully knew. Struggles with depression, doubts about his business decisions, guilt about the distance his work created in their marriage. The affair with Amy Chen appears in the journal as a confession written to no one, pages of guilt and self-recrimination that Thomas never intended anyone to read. But alongside the guilt, Margaret finds evidence of the man she fell in love with. His genuine remorse, his determination to be a better husband, his deep love for his family. I am not the man my family thinks I am, Thomas had written in 1979. But perhaps I can become the man they deserve. Margaret closes the journal and looks around the study that has been her shrine to Thomas's memory. The room is exactly as he left it 25 years ago, preserved like a museum to a perfect man who never existed. For the first time since his death, Margaret begins to understand that loving someone completely means accepting their imperfections along with their virtues. Meanwhile, Michael Chen sits in his own modest apartment, staring at a business card Elena had pressed into his hand before he left Chloe's building. Morrison Construction, it reads, with David's name embossed below the company logo. For 45 years, Michael has wondered about his father's family, imagined scenarios where he might belong somewhere beyond the small circle of his mother's love. Today, he met them and discovered they're as complicated and flawed as any family. The question now is whether their flaws make them more human and relatable, or whether their dysfunction makes them impossible to love. His phone rings and Michael recognizes Chloe's number. Michael, it's Chloe Morrison. I know today was overwhelming, but I wanted you to know that not everyone in our family is as screwed up as we probably seemed. Michael finds himself smiling at her directness. You all seemed pretty human to me. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Would you like to have coffee sometime? Just us, no family drama, no confrontations. I'd like to get to know my uncle without an audience. The word uncle hits Michael unexpectedly. He spent his adult life as an only child with no extended family, and suddenly he has nephews and a niece who want to know him. I'd like that, Michael says, and means it. As the day draws to a close, each member of the Morrison family sits with their choices. Elena and David begin the difficult work of rebuilding their marriage on a foundation of honesty, rather than convenience. Jake must decide whether to fight for Victoria, or accept that some relationships can't survive the truth. Margaret faces the choice between clinging to illusions or embracing a more complex reality. And Michael must decide whether to become part of a family that has finally learned to see themselves clearly. The consequences of Elena's Sunday night revelation continue to ripple outward, but for the first time since the truth was spoken, the future feels like something they might be able to choose, rather than something that's happening to them. In the quiet of their respective homes, each Morrison family member realizes that the real choice isn't between truth and lies, but between growth and stagnation, between authentic relationships and comfortable facades. The family that emerges from this crisis, if any family emerges at all, will be fundamentally different from the one that gathered for dinner 4 days ago. Whether that change represents healing or destruction remains to be seen. 3 weeks after the confrontation at Chloe's apartment, Elena Morrison wakes to find David already up, sitting at their kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee and the morning paper folded beside him. This has become their new routine. Careful mornings where they navigate the delicate work of rebuilding a marriage that survived 35 years, but nearly shattered under the weight of one revealed truth. Victoria's engagement announcement appeared in the society pages, David says quietly, sliding the paper across to Elena. The Ashworth family made it official yesterday. Elena reads the brief notice. The engagement between Victoria Elizabeth Ashworth and Jacob Morrison has been dissolved by mutual consent. Miss Ashworth wishes Mr. Morrison well in his future endeavors. The clinical language can't disguise the finality of the statement. Elena thinks about Jake, who has spent 3 weeks believing he could salvage his relationship through sheer determination. She wonders if he's seen the announcement yet, if he understands that some doors, once closed, don't reopen. How do you think he'll take it? Elena asks, though she already knows the answer. Badly. He's been living in denial, convinced that Victoria would come around once the family drama settled. David's voice carries the weight of a father watching his son's world collapse. He called yesterday asking if I could reach out to Charles Ashworth, banker to banker, try to smooth things over. Elena feels a familiar stab of guilt. 3 weeks of therapy with Dr. Patricia Hendricks has helped her understand the difference between accountability and self-destruction. But the knowledge doesn't make watching her family suffer any easier. Did you call him? Number. Some bridges can't be rebuilt through professional courtesy. David reaches across the table to take Elena's hand, a gesture that would have been automatic a month ago, but now carries the weight of deliberate choice. Besides, Victoria made her decision. Jake needs to respect it. The marriage counseling has been brutal and necessary. Dr. Hendricks, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who specializes in long-term marriages facing crisis, has forced Elena and David to excavate 35 years of accumulated resentments, unspoken expectations, and convenient silences. They've learned that David's diplomatic nature, which Elena once found charming, often translated to a failure to advocate for her in family conflicts. Elena's vibrant personality, which David genuinely loves, sometimes overwhelmed his more reserved nature in ways that made him retreat rather than engage. I've been thinking about what Dr. Hendricks said yesterday, Elena continues, about choosing each other actively rather than defaulting to habit. David nods. About making our marriage a daily decision rather than an assumption. Are you still choosing me, even after everything I've done to our family? David considers the questions seriously. Another thing they've learned in therapy, the importance of honest answers over reassuring lies. I'm choosing the woman who is brave enough to tell a truth that needed telling, even if her timing was terrible. I'm choosing the woman who protected my father's secret for 25 years, even when it cost her peace of mind. I'm choosing the woman who finally fought back when she was pushed too far. Elena feels tears prick her eyes. Even though I destroyed Jake's engagement? Elena, you didn't break them up. Victoria's reaction to family crisis broke them up. If she couldn't handle us at our worst, she wasn't the right person for Jake. The doorbell interrupts their conversation, and Elena's heart sinks when she sees Jake through the peephole. He looks like he hasn't slept in days, his usual polished appearance replaced by wrinkled clothes and stubble. When she opens the door, he pushes past her without greeting, holding a copy of the morning paper. Did you see this? His voice cracks with exhaustion and fury. Did you see what you did? David appears in the hallway, his expression carefully neutral. Jake, come sit down, let's talk about this. Talk about what? About how my mother's revenge fantasy cost me the woman I love? About how my perfect family turned out to be built on lies and secrets? Jake's voice rises with each word. About how I'm 32 years old and starting over because my grandfather couldn't keep his pants on and my mother couldn't keep her mouth shut? That's enough? David's voice cuts through Jake's tirade with unexpected authority. You want to blame someone for your relationship ending? Blame yourself for being embarrassed by your mother's personality. Blame yourself for choosing image over substance. But don't blame her for finally standing up for herself. Jake stares at his father as if he's become a stranger. You're taking her side? I'm taking the side of honesty. Something I should have done 25 years ago. David's admission hangs heavy in the air. Your mother carried my father's secret alone while I stayed safely silent. She protected our family's reputation while being told she was too much, too loud, too embarrassing. If anyone deserves an apology, it's her. The fight seems to drain out of Jake all at once. He slumps onto the living room couch, his head in his hands. I loved her, Dad. I really loved Victoria. Elena sits beside her son, this man she raised, who has become a stranger through his own choices. I know you did. But Jake, if Victoria loved you the same way, She would have found a way to weather this crisis with you instead of fleeing from it. Her family. Her family pressured her, yes, but ultimately, Victoria made her own choice. She chose her family's approval over building a life with you. Elena's voice is gentle but firm. Wouldn't you rather find out now than after you were married? Jake looks at his mother with something approaching recognition. Is that why you told the truth? Because you were tired of choosing family peace over being yourself? Partly. I was also hurt and angry, and maybe a little drunk. Elena manages a small smile. Dr. Hendricks has helped me understand the difference between reasons and excuses. I had reasons for being upset, but my timing and method were still wrong. Dr. Hendricks? Marriage counseling. David explains. We're learning how to be honest with each other instead of just polite. Jake absorbs this information, recognizing that his parents' marriage has entered territory as unfamiliar as his own new reality. How do you rebuild after something like this? Very carefully, Elena says. One conversation at a time, one honest moment followed by another. Across town, Margaret Morrison sits in her garden, a space that has always brought her peace. At 85, she's discovered that the capacity for change doesn't disappear with age. It just requires more courage. The past 3 weeks have been a masterclass in reassessing a lifetime of assumptions. She's been meeting weekly with Michael Chen, coffee appointments that began as obligation and have evolved into something approaching genuine connection. Yesterday, he brought photographs of his mother, Amy Chen, at various stages of her life, including one where she's clearly pregnant and radiant with joy. She was beautiful, Margaret had told him, and meant it. I can see why Thomas was drawn to her. Michael had studied Margaret's face carefully. Does it hurt, seeing pictures of your husband's other relationship? Margaret had considered the question seriously. It hurts less than I expected. Maybe because she's not a threat anymore. Just a woman who loved the same man I did, in a different time and circumstance. Now sitting among her roses, Margaret wonders if this capacity for acceptance has always existed within her, waiting for the right crisis to emerge. She thinks about Thomas's journals, the man revealed in those pages who struggled with depression, doubt, and the weight of others' expectations. The affair with Amy wasn't the action of a callous man, but of someone seeking connection during a difficult period. That understanding doesn't excuse Thomas's choices, but it humanizes them. Margaret has spent 25 years loving a perfect man who never existed. Now she has the opportunity to love the flawed, complicated, real man who actually lived. Chloe Morrison has become the family's unofficial ambassador, the one person who maintains relationships with everyone despite the ongoing tensions. Her small apartment has become neutral territory, where individual family members can process their feelings without the weight of group dynamics. Today, she's having lunch with Michael at a small bistro downtown, continuing their careful cultivation of an uncle-niece relationship that feels both natural and surreal. How are you handling all of this? Chloe asks, watching Michael navigate his salad with the careful attention he brings to everything. Some days better than others, Michael admits. It's strange, suddenly having family after 45 years of not having any. Especially family that's this complicated. We're not usually this dramatic, Chloe says, then laughs at her own words. Actually, that's probably not true. We're probably exactly this dramatic. We just usually hide it better. Michael's smile transforms his entire face. I like the honesty. Growing up, I always imagined having siblings who could call me on my nonsense. You and Jake seem to do that for each other pretty effectively. Quote, when we're speaking, yes, Jake's still processing everything. Chloe's diplomatic nature makes her careful about criticizing family members, even to other family members. The engagement ending hit him hard. Do you think they would have been happy together? Chloe considers the question while watching Michael's face. She's noticed that he asks thoughtful questions, the kind that suggest he's genuinely interested in understanding the family dynamics he's inherited. I think Jake would have been happy with Victoria's approval, and Victoria would have been happy with Jake's status, whether that's the same as being happy together. Chloe shrugs. Maybe this crisis saved them both from a mistake. And you? How are you handling having an uncle who appeared out of nowhere? Honestly, it's the most interesting thing that's happened to our family in years. We needed shaking up. Chloe's honesty surprises them both. We were getting too comfortable with our own mythology. Michael laughs, a genuine sound that makes Chloe realize she likes this man who shares her blood. Well, I'm glad my existence serves a purpose beyond disrupting engagement dinners. Your existence serves the purpose of making us all more honest about who we really are. That's not a small thing. As their lunch continues, Chloe finds herself thinking about the wedding she's been planning, wondering if the Morrison family that emerges from this crisis will be recognizable enough to celebrate with. But watching Michael's careful kindness, his thoughtful questions, his willingness to engage with a family that has given him every reason to walk away, she thinks perhaps the new Morrison family might actually be an improvement over the old one. The afternoon light filters through the restaurant's windows, illuminating a conversation between two people who are learning to be family in real time. Outside, Westfield continues its orderly existence, but inside this small space, the complicated work of building authentic relationships continues one honest word at a time. 3 weeks after Elena's revelation shattered their comfortable illusions, the Morrison family is discovering that broken things can sometimes be rebuilt stronger than they were before, if everyone involved is willing to do the hard work of truth-telling and genuine change. But not everyone is willing, and some damage once done leaves permanent scars that must be acknowledged and accepted rather than healed. The question facing each family member is whether they can build something meaningful from the ruins of what they thought they knew, or whether some breaks are too fundamental to bridge. 6 months after Elena Morrison shattered her family's carefully constructed mythology, autumn arrives in Westfield with the kind of crisp clarity that makes everything seem possible again. Elena stands in the garden center of Morrison's Hardware, not the family business, but a local establishment where she's found unexpected purpose, explaining mulching techniques to Mrs. Patterson, an elderly customer who has become one of her regulars. The key is to keep the mulch 3 inches away from the base of your roses. Elena demonstrates, her hands confident as she arranges wood chips around a potted plant. Too close, and you'll get crown rot. Too far, and you're not protecting the root system from winter frost. 6 months ago, Elena couldn't have imagined finding satisfaction in such mundane work. The marketing executive who once commanded corporate boardrooms has discovered that teaching neighbors about soil pH and pruning schedules provides a different but equally meaningful kind of influence. Here, her enthusiasm is welcomed rather than managed. Her animated explanations about companion planting and seasonal care are met with genuine interest rather than polite tolerance. "You're a treasure, Elena," Mrs. Patterson says, loading her purchases into her cart. "Harold says our garden has never looked better since you started helping us." Elena watches her customer leave with the warm satisfaction of someone who has found her place in the world again. The job at Morrison's Hardware, entirely coincidental name aside, has become more than employment. It's become identity reconstruction. 3 days a week, she helps customers solve problems that have concrete solutions. 2 days a week, she volunteers at the community garden, teaching urban farming techniques to young families who can't afford grocery store prices. The work matters in ways that corporate marketing never did. There's something profoundly healing about helping things grow, rather than manipulating perceptions about things that already exist. Her phone buzzes with a text from Chloe, "Final dress fitting this afternoon. Are you sure you're ready for this?" Elena smiles at her daughter's careful concern. Chloe's wedding, now just 2 weeks away, will be the first Morrison family gathering since the confrontation at her apartment. Everyone has agreed to attend. Even Jake, who has spent the past 6 months rebuilding his life from the ground up, but the approaching event carries weight beyond typical wedding nerves. "Ready as I'll ever be," Elena texts back. "This day is about you and Marcus, not family drama." The response comes quickly. "Promise you won't make any shocking revelations during the reception?" "Promise. I've used up my quota of shocking revelations for this lifetime." Elena's relationship with Chloe has deepened over the past 6 months, built on a foundation of honest communication that feels entirely new. Chloe has stopped trying to mediate family conflicts and started focusing on her own happiness. The relief in her daughter's voice when she talks about her upcoming marriage tells Elena that some good has come from the family's forced evolution. Elena closes the hardware store at 5 and drives across town to Margaret's house, a weekly ritual that began 3 months ago when Margaret called out of the blue and asked if Elena would like to have dinner. No agenda, no family crisis requiring discussion, just an invitation that suggested the possibility of genuine relationship. Margaret Morrison has changed more than anyone over the past 6 months. The rigid matriarch who once ruled family gatherings with subtle disapproval has been replaced by a woman who asks questions rather than making pronouncements. The transformation began with her relationship with Michael, but it has extended to every aspect of her life. Elena, perfect timing. Margaret greets her at the door, and Elena is struck again by how much warmer Margaret's smile has become. Michael just called. He'll be here in 20 minutes. These dinners have become the most surprising development in Elena's post-revelation life. Margaret cooking simple meals, Michael bringing wine and stories from his carpentry work, Elena contributing vegetables from the community garden. 3 people who should have been enemies, bound together by the complicated legacy of Thomas Morrison's choices. How did the job interview go? Elena asks as they move to the kitchen. Michael had mentioned considering a position with a high-end furniture company that would utilize both his craftsmanship skills and his weekend art. He got it, Margaret says with unmistakable pride. Design consultant for custom pieces. They're even interested in featuring some of his sculptures in their showroom. Elena feels a warmth that surprises her, genuine happiness for Michael's success, the kind of pride an aunt might feel for a nephew's achievement. The relationship between them has evolved carefully over 6 months, built on shared experiences rather than shared history. Michael brings a perspective to the family that none of them possessed before, the viewpoint of someone who grew up outside their assumptions and expectations. When Michael arrives, he carries a bottle of wine and a small wrapped package. For Chloe, he explains, handing Elena the gift. I made it in my shop. Something for her new home. Elena unwraps a beautiful wooden cutting board, the wood grain rich and complex, with subtle carving around the edges that transforms a functional object into art. Michael, this is gorgeous. She'll treasure it. I wanted to contribute something to the wedding, even if I'm not. He pauses, searching for the right words. Not what? Margaret asks, settling into her chair with the careful attention she now pays to Michael's emotional state. Not really family in the traditional sense. I mean, I am, but I'm also not. It's complicated. Elena and Margaret exchange glances. This is Michael's ongoing struggle, belonging to a family that didn't know he existed for 45 years, being welcomed by some members, while remaining uncertain about his place in family traditions and celebrations. You're absolutely family, Elena says firmly. Complicated family, but family nonetheless. Besides, the Morrisons have discovered that traditional family dynamics are overrated. Margaret nods in agreement. Michael, you've become one of my greatest unexpected joys. Thomas would be proud of the man you've become, and proud that his family was eventually wise enough to embrace you. The conversation flows easily as they share dinner, covering Michael's new job, Elena's garden projects, Margaret's decision to finally update the decor in her house. The ease between them would have been unimaginable 6 months ago, but crisis has a way of stripping away pretense and revealing who people actually are beneath their social roles. How is Jake doing? Michael asks, and Elena appreciates that he always inquires about family members even when, especially when, the relationships are strained. Better, I think. Different, but better. Elena considers how to explain Jake's transformation over the past 6 months. Losing Victoria forced him to examine what he actually wanted from life versus what he thought he was supposed to want. Jake's journey has been the most dramatic of anyone's. The loss of his engagement, initially devastating, eventually became liberation from a life that had been more performance than authentic choice. He's moved to a smaller apartment, changed jobs from corporate finance to nonprofit development, and started therapy to address what he calls his approval addiction. He's dating someone new, Elena continues. A teacher named Sarah who finds his family's chaos amusing rather than mortifying. She's coming to the wedding. That's wonderful, Margaret says, and Elena can hear that she means it. Margaret's relationship with Jake has slowly rebuilt over the months, based on his growing understanding of what his criticism had cost Elena, and her growing acceptance that perfection is not a prerequisite for love. The conversation turns to wedding preparations, and Elena finds herself looking forward to the event in ways she couldn't have imagined months ago. Chloe's wedding will be a test of the family's new dynamics, but it will also be a celebration of growth and resilience. After dinner, as Elena prepares to leave, Margaret touches her arm gently. "Elena, I want you to know that I'm grateful for what you did. Not for how you did it, necessarily, but for forcing all of us to stop living in fantasy." The admission hangs between them, 6 months of slow reconciliation condensed into one honest moment. Elena thinks about the woman Margaret was before the revelation. Rigid, critical, defensive of illusions that served no one. The woman standing before her now is softer, more curious, more willing to embrace complexity. "I'm grateful too," Elena replies, "for your willingness to build something new instead of just mourning what was broken." Driving home through Westfield's quiet streets, Elena reflects on the strange alchemy of the past 6 months. The family that's emerging from the crisis bears little resemblance to the one that gathered for Jake's engagement dinner. But it's proving to be more resilient and more authentic than what came before. At home, she finds David in his study, grading papers from the adult education class he started teaching at the community college. Retirement has suited him better than either of them expected. The pressure of maintaining professional success has been replaced by the satisfaction of helping returning students navigate basic accounting and business principles. "How was dinner with Margaret and Michael?" David asks, looking up from a student's essay on small business marketing. "Good. Really good. Michael got the job with the furniture company." Elena settles into the reading chair across from David's desk, a position that has become their evening ritual. "Margaret asked him to escort her to Chloe's wedding. I think she's decided to claim him publicly as family." David smiles. "Good for her, and good for him. He deserves to be acknowledged for who he is rather than hidden like a shameful secret." Their marriage has found a new equilibrium over the past 6 months, built on practices learned in Dr. Hendricks' office but refined through daily application. They've learned to check in with each other about feelings before they become resentments. They've learned to advocate for their individual needs while supporting their shared goals. Most importantly, they've learned that love requires active choice rather than passive assumption. "Are you nervous about the wedding?" David asks, recognizing the contemplative expression on Elena's face. "Not nervous, exactly. More like aware of how much has changed. 6 months ago, I thought my biggest problem was being taken for granted. I had no idea how much deeper our family's issues ran." Quote, "Do you regret it? The revelation, I mean. Not the timing or the method, but the fact that you finally told the truth?" Elena considers the question seriously. The cost has been significant. Relationships damaged, illusions shattered, comfortable patterns destroyed. But the benefits have been profound. Authentic connections, personal growth, the replacement of performance with genuine intimacy. "No," she says finally, "I don't regret it. We're all more honest with each other now, more real. That has to be worth something." Even if Jake hadn't forgiven you? Even if our marriage hadn't survived? Even then, some truths are too important to keep buried, regardless of the cost. Elena pauses, then adds with a slight smile, "Though I'm grateful the cost wasn't as high as I feared it might be." They sit in comfortable silence for a while, David grading papers, while Elena reads a gardening magazine. The quiet feels different from the careful silences that characterize their relationship after the revelation. This quiet is peaceful rather than tense, filled with presence rather than avoidance. Elena's phone buzzes with a group text from Chloe, "Wedding party dinner tomorrow night at 7. Everyone confirmed except Robert, who's, quote, "considering his options." Typical. Robert has been the family holdout, the one member who hasn't fully engaged with the new dynamic. He attends necessary family functions, but maintains emotional distance, as if the revelation of Thomas's flaws somehow diminished his own status as the successful younger brother. His resistance to change has been noted, but not pushed. Some people need more time to process major shifts in their worldview. "I'll be there," Elena texts back, then adds, "looking forward to meeting Marcus's family properly." Chloe's fiancé, Marcus, comes from a large, boisterous Italian family that has embraced the Morrison drama with the kind of good humor that makes Elena wonder if other families handle crisis with less devastation and more resilience. Marcus himself has become a steadying presence in Chloe's life, someone who encourages her natural diplomatic gifts while preventing her from sacrificing her own needs for family peace. "I should call Michael," Elena says suddenly. "Make sure he feels comfortable at the wedding party dinner tomorrow. He's still hesitant about family events." "He'll be fine," David assures her. "Margaret will make sure he feels included, and Chloe adores him. You've all done good work building bridges over the past 6 months." Elena nods but makes a mental note to text Michael anyway. The careful tending of rebuilt relationships has become important work for all of them. Trust, once broken, requires consistent maintenance to rebuild. As she gets ready for bed, Elena looks at herself in the bathroom mirror and sees a woman who has found her footing again. The desperate need for family validation that had characterized her retirement has been replaced by confidence drawn from meaningful work and authentic relationships. She's learned the difference between being loved for who she pretends to be and being loved for who she actually is. 6 months ago, she had been a woman whose identity was threatened by her son's embarrassment. Tonight, she's a woman who has built a life that doesn't depend on anyone else's approval for its value. The transformation hasn't been easy, and it's not complete. There are still conversations to be had, relationships to continue healing, new patterns to establish. But for the first time since she spoke Thomas Morrison's secret aloud, Elena feels genuinely optimistic about her family's future. Tomorrow night, they'll gather again, not for crisis management or confrontation, but for celebration. Chloe's wedding will test whether the Morrison family has learned to be together in joy as well as trauma. Elena suspects they'll pass that test, though perhaps not in any way their old selves would have recognized or approved of. The woman in the mirror smiles back at her, a smile that carries the satisfaction of someone who has done difficult work and lived to tell about it. Some foundations, when broken, can be rebuilt stronger than before. Elena Morrison is about to find out if her family is one of them. The morning of Chloe Morrison's wedding dawns crisp and clear, the kind of October day that makes Westfield look like a postcard advertisement for New England autumn. Elena stands at her bedroom window, watching early sunlight filter through maple trees that have transformed into brilliant shades of gold and crimson. 6 months ago, she might have taken such a perfect day as a sign that everything would go smoothly. Now, she knows better than to rely on omens. The Morrison family has learned to create their own good fortune through honest work and careful attention to each other's needs. At the Westfield Country Club, the setting Chloe chose specifically because it holds no Morrison family history, wedding preparations proceed with the kind of organized chaos that Elena remembers from her corporate event planning days. But today, she's not the orchestrator. She's simply the mother of the bride, a role that has taken her months to learn to inhabit with grace rather than overwhelming enthusiasm. "Mom, you look beautiful," Chloe says, appearing in the bridal suite doorway in her wedding dress, a simple, elegant sheath that speaks to her practical nature while still managing to be stunning. The past 6 months have been good to Chloe. She carries herself with new confidence, the relief of someone who no longer feels responsible for managing everyone else's emotions. Elena takes in the sight of her daughter, radiant with happiness that has nothing to do with family approval or social expectations. "You look like yourself," Elena says, and means it as the highest compliment. "Happy and authentic and perfectly you. That's what Marcus says he fell in love with, the real me, not the peacekeeper version." Chloe's smile carries the satisfaction of someone who has learned the difference between being loved for her usefulness and being loved for her essence. Margaret appears in the doorway, moving more slowly than she once did, but with a dignity that has deepened rather than diminished over the past months. She carries a small velvet box that Elena recognizes from Thomas's study. "Chloe, dear, I wanted you to have these," Margaret says, opening the box to reveal pearl earrings that have been in the Morrison family for 3 generations. "They were my grandmother's, then mine, and I always imagined passing them to my granddaughter on her wedding day." Chloe's eyes fill with tears as Margaret helps her put on the earrings. The gesture carries weight beyond tradition. It's Margaret's public claim of Chloe as family, her investment in the Morrison legacy continuing through authentic relationships rather than perfect facades. "They're perfect," Chloe whispers, hugging her grandmother with the careful tenderness she's learned to show the family's eldest member. Downstairs, the men gather in the club's oak-paneled bar, and the scene would look familiar to anyone who has attended Morrison family events, except for the presence of Michael Chen, who stands beside David with the easy comfort of someone who has found his place in the family constellation. Michael wears a suit that Elena helped him choose, dark navy that complements his quiet dignity without trying to transform him into someone he's not. Jake approaches Michael with 2 glasses of scotch, a peace offering that has taken 6 months to fully materialize. "For my uncle," Jake says, and the word carries acceptance that would have been impossible before the crisis forced him to examine his own values. "How are you doing?" Michael asks, recognizing that weddings can be difficult for someone whose own engagement ended in spectacular failure. "Better than I expected," Jake admits. "Sarah couldn't make it. She's covering for a colleague, but I'm genuinely happy for Chloe. It feels good to celebrate something instead of managing damage." Jake's transformation has been the most dramatic of anyone's. The image-conscious finance executive has been replaced by someone who works for a nonprofit focused on affordable housing development. His new girlfriend, Sarah, teaches 3rd grade and finds the Morrison family's complexity amusing, rather than alarming. The change isn't just professional. Jake has learned to find satisfaction in work that serves others rather than advancing his own status. David watches his son and brother-in-law with quiet satisfaction. The family that's gathering for this wedding bears little resemblance to the one that imploded 6 months ago, but it feels more solid somehow, built on reality rather than mutual performance. Robert Morrison makes his entrance with characteristic timing, late enough to suggest his ambivalence about family gatherings, early enough to avoid actual rudeness. He's the one family member who hasn't fully embraced the new dynamic, maintaining cordial but distant relationships with everyone except Margaret, whom he still treats with the deference due their shared grief over Thomas's revealed imperfections. "Robert," David greets his brother with the careful neutrality they've both learned to maintain. "Thank you for coming. Wouldn't miss Chloe's wedding," Robert replies, then adds with grudging honesty, "even if I'm still adjusting to our new family configuration." Michael extends his hand to Robert, a gesture he makes at every family gathering regardless of how it's received. "Robert?" Robert shakes the offered hand with professional courtesy. He's never been openly hostile to Michael, but he's also never moved beyond treating him as an unfortunate complication rather than a welcomed addition. Some relationships, Elena has learned, change slowly or not at all. The ceremony itself unfolds with the kind of grace that comes from careful planning and genuine joy. Chloe walks down the aisle, escorted by David, her face luminous with happiness. Marcus waits at the altar with the kind of smile that makes it clear he considers himself the luckiest man alive. The vows they exchange are personal and heartfelt, speaking of partnership, growth, and the courage to love authentically even when it's complicated. Elena watches from the front row, her emotions carefully managed but deeply felt. This is what she's learned over the past 6 months: how to be present for her children's joy without making it about her own needs for attention or validation. The mother, who once overwhelmed family gatherings with enthusiastic storytelling, now sits quietly, her pride evident but contained. Beside her, David reaches for her hand, as Chloe and Marcus are pronounced husband and wife. The gesture speaks of their rebuilt marriage, stronger for having been tested, more intentional for having been examined and recommitted to daily. The reception reveals the full scope of the Morrison family's evolution. Margaret sits at the head table between Michael and Elena, a seating arrangement that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago, but now feels natural. She's telling Michael stories about Thomas's younger years, sharing memories that humanize her late husband rather than mythologize him. "Your father had the most terrible sense of direction." Margaret laughs, her voice carrying affection rather than criticism. "He once got lost driving to his own office and showed up 3 hours late to an important meeting because he was too proud to ask for directions." Michael smiles at the story, these small glimpses into Thomas's personality, helping him construct a more complete picture of the father he never knew. "That explains why I can never find anything without GPS. I thought it was just me." Elena watches this exchange with deep satisfaction. Margaret's relationship with Michael has become one of the most unexpected gifts of the family's transformation. She's found in him not just a connection to Thomas, but a new source of purpose and joy in her later years. Jake sits with Sarah's family, animated as he explains the Morrison family's recent changes to her parents. His honesty about the family crisis, something that would have mortified him months ago, now serves as a point of connection rather than embarrassment. Families are complicated, Sarah's mother says with Italian frankness. The ones that pretend they're not complicated are usually the most damaged. Jake laughs, recognizing truth in the observation. We've definitely learned that lesson. As the evening progresses, Elena finds herself in conversation with guests who remember her from her corporate days, community members who know her from the hardware store and garden center, new friends from her volunteer work. The identity crisis that followed her retirement has resolved into something richer and more complex. She's no longer just the Morrison family matriarch or the successful marketing executive, but a woman with her own interests, relationships, and contributions to the community. Elena approaches Mrs. Patterson from the hardware store. I wanted to thank you again for helping Harold with his tomato blight problem. We had the best harvest in years thanks to your advice. Elena feels the warm satisfaction of expertise shared and problem solved. The work that gives her life meaning now is different from her corporate achievements, but no less valuable. She has learned to find fulfillment in helping rather than commanding, in teaching rather than controlling. As the reception winds down, the Morrison family gathers for final photographs. The group that poses together looks different from family photos taken in previous years. Michael stands between Margaret and David, his presence no longer feeling like an intrusion but like a completion. Jake and Chloe flank Elena and David, their relationship with their parents rebuilt on foundations of mutual respect rather than hierarchical obligation. Everyone smile, the photographer calls, but Elena realizes they already are, genuine expressions of satisfaction rather than performed happiness. Later, as guests depart and the family lingers over final conversations, Elena finds herself standing on the country club's terrace, looking out over Westfield's rolling hills. The town that has been her home for 35 years looks the same, but her place in it has transformed completely. David joins her on the terrace, loosening his tie with the satisfaction of someone who has successfully navigated a complex social event. Good wedding, he says, his arms settling around Elena's shoulders. Beautiful wedding, Elena agrees. Chloe looked so happy. They both did. You did well today, David continues. I know it wasn't easy, stepping back and letting others take center stage. Elena considers this observation. 6 months ago, she would have needed to be the most animated person at any family gathering, the one whose stories and enthusiasm defined the event's energy. Today, she found deep satisfaction in witnessing rather than performing, in supporting rather than commanding attention. I think I'm finally learning the difference between being important and being central, Elena says. I can matter to this family without needing to control it. Michael appears on the terrace, carrying his jacket and looking thoughtful. Thank you for including me in all of this, he says to Elena and David. I know it hasn't been easy, integrating someone who showed up out of nowhere. You didn't show up out of nowhere, Elena corrects gently. You've always been part of this family. We just took 45 years to acknowledge it properly. The three of them stand together in comfortable silence, looking out over the landscape that has shaped their family's story. Behind them, Chloe and Marcus laugh with Margaret about something, their voices carrying the easy intimacy of people who genuinely enjoy each other's company. Do you think Thomas would be proud of how this turned out? Michael asks, voicing the question that has haunted all of them. Elena considers the question seriously. I think he'd be amazed that a family could survive this much truth-telling and come out stronger. But yes, I think he'd be proud that his secret finally led to healing, rather than just hiding. As the evening ends and family members begin their separate journeys home, Elena reflects on the distance traveled since that disastrous Sunday dinner 6 months ago. The woman who spoke Thomas Morrison's secret in a moment of wounded fury has been replaced by someone who understands the difference between truth-telling as weapon and truth-telling as foundation for authentic relationship. The Morrison family that emerges from this wedding celebration is smaller in some ways. Robert's emotional distance, Victoria's absence, but more honest, more resilient, more genuinely connected than what came before. They've learned to love each other's flaws rather than demanding perfection, to support each other's growth rather than maintaining comfortable facades. Elena Morrison stands on the threshold of her new life, surrounded by family members who see her clearly and love her anyway. The journey from that moment of devastating revelation to this evening of genuine celebration has been difficult, but it has led to something she never expected: the opportunity to be authentically herself within relationships that can withstand honesty. Some truths, Elena has learned, are worth the cost of speaking them. Some secrets are meant to be broken open so that what's hidden beneath can finally grow into the light. As she drives home through Westfield's quiet streets, Elena realizes that she has found what she was searching for all along. Not validation or control, but simple recognition of her worth and place in the world. The family dinner that ended in disaster has led, through months of careful work and painful honesty, to a wedding celebration that feels like a new beginning. The Morrison family story continues, but now it's written in truth rather than fiction, built on acceptance rather than performance. And Elena Morrison, at 61, has finally learned how to be both fully herself and fully part of something larger than herself. The balance, she realizes, is everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. Quote,